All right.
Yeah.
I know that you listen to Interfaith Dialogue. The discussion I had with Dr. James White about his interfaith dialogue with a conservative Muslim imam, whom critics call a jihadi is, imam, Yasir Qadhi. And of course, James would say he is a committed conservative Muslim, but not a jihadist. And many are debating those issues even as we speak now. But Neil, you listened to the interview I had with Dr. White, and two things you know uniquely living in Iraq. You know how ugly, how murderous, how horrific radical Islam is. You also know how the great majority of Muslims do not share those sentiments.
Mm-hmm.
From your perspective, as a missionary in the Muslim world, was it a wise thing for James to do, to have civil discussion, perhaps to bring walls down and maybe to undemonize certain people, and therefore Christians and Muslims talk face to face? Or is this just being a useful idiot for Islam, and now you basically desensitize people to the dangers of radical Islam? What was your take?
Right. I love that James White did this. I think it was a beautiful example of who we are supposed to be. Of course, we're supposed to be wise, but we come with love. It's a demonstration of the kingdom of God that comes in humility and love. And if I'm debating and arguing, it's not going to sound like love to the person that I'm arguing with. Are you still there, Dr. Brown?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is what we do all the time. We sit down with people who are on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of belief and faith. And we have a choice. I'm either going to argue with you about who Muhammad is and what the Quran is and how evil and vile it is and the expression of Islam and what it's done to the Middle East, or we can talk about Jesus, and we can talk about the kingdom of God, and we can talk about what that looks like. And I can demonstrate that for you, even with how I interact with you as a human being, my tone of voice, the way that I honor and I respect you as an individual created in God's image. The last thing we want to do is tear somebody down, so we can prove a theological point. That's not going to convince somebody of anything. At best, it may convince their mind, but it's not going to lead to a genuine conversion in their heart. And so I applauded James White for doing that.
Now, Neil, have you yourself interacted with devout Muslims? You said maybe 75% are not devout. The men are not praying 5 times a day, and many of the younger people are even more alienated from Islam because of ISIS, as you live there in northern Iraq. Have you interacted, though, with very conservative Muslims as well?
I've sat down in the middle of Mosul in individuals' homes and had lunch with imams who I know were leading prayers for ISIS in the mosque. I've sat down with young men who lived their entire time through ISIS and are now studying to be imams. And I can tell you the best fruit that we've ever seen is when we sit down and we discuss Jesus. We don't want to talk about the Quran. We don't want to talk about Muhammad. Let's talk about Jesus. Let's talk about the truth, because they've never heard these things. So for us, when we cross the boundary into debate and argument, it's never going to end up good. But when we can introduce something to them that they've never heard before, because there's something inside of them that longs for this truth. And when we can give it to them, that's when they're entered into the kingdom.
All right, friends, that is a perspective of a missionary living in the Muslim world. We'll be right back.